Billionaire husband's secret trip to Paris with Mistress revealed by his pregnant wife. Shocking ending. Naomi clutched her phone with trembling fingers, heart hammering as she read the anonymous text claiming her billionaire husband, Ethan Sutton, had just landed in Paris with another woman on his arm. Pregnant and plagued by anxiety, Naomi had tried to ignore the warning signs for months. But the rumors were undeniable now. She stared at the words seen at the Ritz Paris, feeling a chill swirl around her heart. Could Ethan really betray her like this, especially when their unborn child depended on them both? The next move was clear. She had to uncover the truth, and she would stop at nothing to do so. Naomi Sutton had grown up with a quiet determination to build a life of comfort and purpose, but never in her wildest dreams had she expected to marry into the glitz and glamour of high society. When she first encountered Ethan Sutton at a charity gala in New York City, she was drawn to his magnetism, his gentle smile, and the confident way he navigated the opulent crowd. They met near the Champagne Fountain, introduced by a mutual friend who worked at Tiffany and Company, and the spark was instantaneous. Ethan, heir to the Sutton Group, a global real estate empire, stood tall and lean, dressed impeccably in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo. He had carved out his own success outside his family's fortune, establishing a line of luxurious hotels in top destinations around the world. Impressed by Naomi's calm demeanor, unaffected by wealth or status, he pursued her from that moment forward. Within a year, Ethan proposed to her in a private garden overlooking the Hudson River, complete with a ring he had designed himself set with a single, gleaming diamond. Their engagement story was the talk of society pages. From the outside, their marriage appeared to be a fairy tale. Lavish vacations in the Maldives, close friendships with Hollywood celebrities, and a New York penthouse that boasted floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Central Park. Naomi and Ethan seemed to have it all. But beneath the sheen of perfect happiness, cracks had started to form. While Ethan's ambition fueled him to constantly expand their empire, Naomi felt him slipping further and further from her. He attended back-to-back business meetings, took last-minute flights overseas, and became evasive whenever Naomi asked too many questions. When Naomi discovered she was pregnant, she believed it would be a turning point for their relationship. She fantasized about cozy nights spent picking out nursery furniture, Ethan excitedly placing his palm against her growing belly as they both bonded over the miracle of new life. Instead, Ethan seemed to grow more distant. He offered half-hearted smiles when she brought up baby names and was never around to accompany her to obstetric appointments. Something was amiss. "Hey, honey, will you be able to attend the ultrasound appointment next Friday?" Naomi had asked one evening, her tone filled with a hopeful lilt. Ethan glanced at her from across the room, rifling through a sheaf of documents, his gaze flicking between her and the papers. "I'll have to check with my assistant," he'd replied. "It's a busy time, new property acquisitions in Europe." He punctuated the statement with an apologetic smile, but Naomi noticed the slight tremor of guilt in his eyes. For the rest of that night, she tossed and turned, wrestling with the suspicion that her dream marriage might be in jeopardy. Rumors began swirling in exclusive circles that Ethan had been seen with a mysterious brunette at a private art show, or that he was spending suspiciously extended weekends in Europe under the guise of business. Naomi tried to silence her anxieties, telling herself it was just tabloid fodder. After all, Ethan had built his career on forging high-level connections, which often included striking up alliances with glamorous people from the upper echelons of society. Yet one day, a single text message hit her phone like a thunderbolt. "I saw your husband at the Ritz in Paris." He wasn't alone. She stared at the cryptic words, panic igniting within her. Her intuition roared to life. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Naomi looked at the reflection of her growing belly in the mirror, tears pooling in her eyes. She vowed that she would uncover the truth. Though fear gripped her heart, a new, steely resolve welled up within her. She refused to be made a fool. Long before meeting Ethan, Naomi had been a small-town girl with big dreams. She hailed from a modest upbringing in Lake Forest, Illinois. Her father worked as a high school teacher, her mother a librarian. Growing up in a household that valued education above everything, Naomi pursued a degree in fine arts and dreamed of establishing community programs that would bring art to underprivileged neighborhoods. Her work ethic and passion eventually took her to New York City, where she began volunteering at a non-profit dedicated to fostering creative opportunities for children. It was in this philanthropic sphere that she encountered the mesmerizing world of the ultra-wealthy. At first, Naomi felt out of place in the plush environment of champagne-laden receptions and designer-clad socialites. Yet her genuine warmth and kindness earned her a reputation that transcended money and privilege. Donors and sponsors found her presence refreshing, and the same was true for Ethan Sutton when they first crossed paths. Their courtship was swift and enchanting. Ethan surprised her with quiet gestures, handwritten notes, private tours of the Metropolitan Museum of Art after hours, or freshly picked roses from upstate flower farms. She found it endearing that a man of his status would show such attention to detail. Life changed drastically after their engagement. Naomi quickly grew accustomed to the constant swirl of social obligations, fundraising dinners, public appearances, photo shoots for upscale magazines, and the occasional overseas gala. Their wedding took place in a palatial estate owned by Ethan's family in the Hamptons. Celebrity chefs catered the event, tabloids clamored for exclusive coverage, and thousands of white roses decorated the lavish garden ceremony. Still, Naomi remembered how Ethan's eyes shone with what she believed was pure love as they said their vows. But marriage to a billionaire brought complications beyond the fairy tale dresses and star-studded receptions. Ethan's company, Sutton International, seemed to demand more and more of him. After only a month of wedded bliss, Ethan was whisked away on trips to London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Paris, often under the excuse of scoping out new properties for his hotels. Naomi understood that his drive for success was part of the package. She told herself that every successful entrepreneur had to make sacrifices, and so did their families. For a time, Naomi refused to entertain the idea that Ethan might be unfaithful. She knew the tabloids thrived on salacious stories, especially ones involving the rich and famous. As the rumored sightings multiplied, though, a persistent sense of unease anchored itself in her heart. Despite Ethan returning home with expensive gifts, a classic Chanel handbag from Paris, a diamond tennis bracelet rumored to cost 6 figures, Naomi sensed that he was avoiding her questions about why these trips seemed to stretch out longer and longer. Her pregnancy announcement momentarily breathed renewed optimism into her. Ethan responded with quiet relief, hugging her in silence. She interpreted his reaction as happiness, overshadowed by professional stress. Yet as her belly rounded, Ethan's absence in the daily details of her life only compounded her suspicion that something was gravely off. She confided in her best friend, Annabelle, who was also from Lake Forest and had moved to New York for a career in publishing. "I can't shake this feeling, Anna." Naomi sighed over a cup of chamomile tea at a cozy cafe in Midtown. "He disappears for days, sometimes weeks, and the gifts he brings back, they feel more like distractions than tokens of love." Annabelle touched her friend's hand sympathetically. "Have you confronted him?" Naomi nodded slowly. "He always says it's business, then changes the subject or claims he's exhausted. I want to believe him, but the rumors keep stacking up. Sometimes I don't even know who to trust." When the text message about the Ritz in Paris arrived, Naomi froze. She remembered Ethan telling her he was heading to London, but if he's really in Paris, the pieces began to click. Had he lied about London? Naomi's stomach twisted in knots. The baby inside her stirred as if echoing her turmoil. She inhaled a trembling breath. I deserve answers, she told herself. She couldn't allow her child to be born into a web of lies. She made up her mind that she would do whatever was necessary to uncover the truth. And if the rumors were real, if Ethan was truly betraying her, then the consequences would be unimaginable. That night, Naomi lay in bed, restless, while Ethan dozed off beside her, having returned from his latest business trip just hours before. She watched the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, her eyes stinging with unspoken accusations. She wondered how a man could hide so much behind such a peaceful facade. To gather the courage she needed, Naomi silently repeated to herself, I have to know, because not knowing was far more painful than whatever truth she might uncover. The next day, she rose early and took an uncharacteristically bold step. She called Ethan's assistant, Jonathan Wu, at the Sutton international offices. Jonathan had always been polite, if a bit distant, to her. Hi, Jonathan, she said, trying to keep her voice casual. I was wondering if you could help me find the contact details for the property developers in London that Ethan's been meeting with. I'd like to send them a personal thank you gift for hosting him. There was a brief pause. Of course, Mrs. Sutton, Jonathan replied. Let me gather that information and email it to you. She could almost hear his hesitation. Naomi was well aware that if Ethan was covering his tracks, Jonathan probably knew about it. She waited for the email, which arrived with surprising swiftness, listing the names of various London associates, along with addresses and phone numbers. Without hesitation, Naomi picked up her phone and began calling. As she painstakingly worked her way down the list, every single developer confirmed the same story. They had not met with Ethan that week. Some politely said they had no record of any meeting requests at all. By the 10th phone call, Naomi's trembling turned to a cold, determined rage. She fought off tears as the betrayal stabbed deeper with every denial. So he wasn't in London. That left only one possibility. He was in Paris, and he was not alone. When Ethan left for his next trip, Naomi decided to look for more concrete evidence. She dug through old receipts, rummaged through his desk drawers, and examined his credit card statements. The moment she found the credit card bill for 2 first-class tickets to Paris on Air France, she almost collapsed from the rush of dread. A single date leapt out at her from the paper, the same weekend he'd claimed to be in a London conference. There was also a receipt for a lavish dinner at Le Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower, famed for its romantic ambience, where the sum spent on champagne alone was enough to finance a middle-class family for a month. Night after night, Naomi sat alone in the penthouse living room. The glittering lights of Manhattan below reminded her of the illusions she had once embraced as truth. In the quiet hush of early morning, she placed a discreet phone call to a private investigator recommended by one of her friends from the charity circles. The investigator, a woman named Jade Morales, specialized in high-profile marital cases. Mrs. Sutton, I'll need every detail you have. Dates, times, credit card records, anything that can establish a pattern, Jade said matter-of-factly. Naomi poured out every piece of information she'd collected. She heard Jade scribbling notes on the other end of the line. I'll get to work immediately, Jade promised. Stay strong. While Naomi waited for updates from Jade, she went through daily motions with a strained composure. Each time Ethan returned home, Naomi felt her heart break a little more. He continued to kiss her forehead as though everything was fine, continued to pat her stomach with a fleeting grin, and continued to make vague excuses about new expansions in the works. It was all lies, carefully draped over a real estate empire that Naomi now suspected was just as hollow as his empty words. One evening, Naomi noticed Ethan's phone buzzing on the marble countertop. His phone was typically glued to him, but this time he had left it charging in the kitchen while taking a shower. Naomi's pulse hammered. Should I look? She took a breath and grabbed the phone. The lock screen showed a text message from Lauren. 2 heart emojis blinked on the screen. In a rush of desperation, Naomi tried Ethan's passcode, his birthday. It didn't work. She tried her own birthday. That failed as well. Then she tried the digits of the day they got married. The phone unlocked. Dozens of unread messages appeared before her eyes. Lauren, missing you already. When can we see each other again? Lauren, the suite at the Ritz was divine. Next time, I'm picking the restaurant. Zoe, Lauren, think of me when you're lying next to her. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. She scrolled further and found pictures, Lauren smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower. Lauren in an elegant black dress, perched on a sumptuous hotel bed. The date stamps coincided precisely with Ethan's supposed business trips. Naomi's cheeks burned with shock and fury. The phone trembled in her hand. She felt like an intruder, yet she was entitled to every single one of these revelations. Her intuition had been right. It was far worse than she had imagined. When Ethan emerged from the shower, Naomi barely managed to place the phone back on the counter. She fled to the bedroom, tears threatening to escape, and forced herself to breathe. She needed confirmation beyond any shadow of a doubt, and soon, but she also needed the perfect moment to confront him. The investigator, Jade Morales, was thorough and efficient. Within a week, she handed Naomi a folder thick with damning evidence. Photos of Ethan and Lauren holding hands in the streets of Paris, the pair dining in exclusive restaurants, and even entering the Chanel boutique on Rue Cambon, where Ethan had presumably bought his mistress extravagant gifts. Jade documented the sum of their escapades, replete with timestamps and receipts. It was all meticulously curated into an infallible dossier of betrayal. Naomi felt numb as she flipped through the pages. There they were, photographs capturing Ethan's look of contentment, his arm tucked possessively around Lauren's slender waist. The mistress was undeniably striking, tall, brunette, with a polished sophistication that suggested she might be a model or socialite. Naomi wanted to scream, but she forced herself to remain collected for the baby's sake. Adrenaline and heartbreak raged in equal measure. Later that evening, while Ethan was out once again, claiming to be at a business dinner, Naomi decided she needed to escape the suffocating walls of their penthouse. She found herself wandering into a small park a few blocks away. Passing couples pushed strollers, children giggled around a playground, and the smell of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor hung in the crisp air. She felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness as she realized how she'd fallen into a gilded trap. She was a pregnant wife, overshadowed by a man who had spun a masterful web of deceit. Sitting on a bench, Naomi recalled how Ethan's face lit up the day she told him about her pregnancy. She questioned how long he had been carrying on with Lauren. Had it started before or after I conceived? She thought about their unborn child growing inside her, innocent and full of promise. Then she pictured Ethan squiring Lauren through the streets of Paris, indulging in romantic gestures that Naomi had once treasured for herself. Rage and sorrow churned in her, but then came resolve. The question was no longer if Ethan was unfaithful. He was. The question was what she would do about it. The following morning, Naomi received a call from Jade. Mistress, Sutton, I discovered something else you might want to know, Jade said, her tone serious. Your husband and Miss Lauren Walsh visited a luxury real estate agent in Paris. A discreet place, the kind of office catering to high net worth individuals. He might be purchasing property in her name or planning to. Naomi's heart wrenched. He's setting her up, buying her a place to live. It appears that way. I'm still digging, but that's what I've found. I'm sorry, Jade replied, sympathy lacing her words. Naomi clenched her jaw. This was far more than a simple fling. Ethan was orchestrating a second life for his mistress, a life of comfort and extravagance. The betrayal was complete. It felt like her entire world was collapsing, but Naomi refused to spiral into despair. He wants to lie. Fine. Let's see how he fares when I track him down in person. That night, she confronted Ethan as he packed for yet another trip. She stepped into the walk-in closet, arms folded over her chest. "Where are you going this time?" she asked, gaze narrowing. "London." He didn't miss a beat as he zipped up a large leather duffel bag. "There's an important investor meeting and then a quick stop in Rome. I'll probably be gone for a week." Naomi stared at him, noticing the subtle twitch in his left eyebrow. The same lie, recycled. "Rome too, huh? Just an overnight visit. Nothing major." She forced a sweet smile. "I see. Well, be safe." His eyes darted away momentarily, as though expecting more questions. Instead, Naomi just nodded and left the closet. She could sense Ethan's relief behind her. He had no idea she was planning a trip of her own. The next day, Naomi contacted Jade again. The plan was simple. With Jade's help, Naomi would follow Ethan to Paris, ensuring they had indisputable evidence of his affair. Naomi booked a first-class seat on the same Air France flight Ethan had purchased, using an alias to avoid detection. She dressed in simple attire, a loose sweater that concealed her pregnancy and comfortable shoes, so she could blend into the crowds. At JFK Airport, Naomi remained on edge, slipping into the VIP lounge under the name Jade had arranged for her. She caught a glimpse of Ethan across the terminal, phone pressed to his ear, presumably speaking to Lauren. Her pulse hammered. She questioned if he might notice her, but his attention was locked on his conversation. Once he boarded, she waited until the last call to slip into her seat at the opposite end of first class. Anxiety gnawed at her every second of the 7-hour flight, but the baby's slight fluttering in her womb reminded her that this was no longer just about her heartbreak. It was about ensuring a secure future for her child, free from the illusions that Ethan was spinning. The plane touched down in Paris on a chilly morning. Naomi watched from a distance as Ethan exited, scanning the arrivals area, and broke into a delighted smile when Lauren rushed into his arms. Naomi's gut twisted at the spectacle, but she kept her composure. She grabbed her carry-on bag and discreetly followed them. Jade, already on the ground, was positioned with cameras in strategic spots. Together, they trailed the couple to a sleek black limousine that sped off into the heart of Paris. The city of lights greeted Naomi with an unsettling mixture of dread and heartbreak. In her youth, she had fantasized about a romantic trip to Paris with her future husband strolling hand in hand along the Seine, sharing laughter over croissants in hidden cafes, admiring the grandeur of the Louvre. Now, she was following that same husband as he eagerly explored the city, but with another woman. The irony felt like a stab to her soul. Still, Naomi was no longer paralyzed by shock. She had come this far. There was no turning back. With Jade's network of local contacts, Naomi secured a discreet car and driver to track the limousine carrying Ethan and Lauren. At first, the car navigated through quaint cobblestone streets, past chic boutiques and elegant Haussmannian buildings. Finally, they arrived at the Ritz Paris, an establishment famous for hosting the world's most elite figures. Naomi's chest tightened. She recalled the anonymous text message that started it all scene at the Ritz Paris. Huddled in the back seat, Naomi watched through tinted windows as Ethan stepped out, turned, and extended his hand to help Lauren exit. Lauren wore a flowing designer dress and sunglasses perched atop her wavy brown hair. Her laughter rang out as Ethan whispered something that made her smile from ear to ear. Jade was a few cars behind, snapping photos of every incriminating moment. Naomi could barely keep her breathing steady. "They're really here together," she whispered to herself. On some level, she had clung to the faintest hope that all the evidence would turn out to be a misunderstanding. But now, it was undeniable reality. The driver asked softly in French, "Madame, shall I wait here?" Naomi swallowed and nodded. They sat there for a stretch of time until Jade tapped on the window with a quiet rap. The investigator slipped into the back seat next to Naomi, showing her the camera, brimming with images of Ethan and Lauren checking into the Ritz under the name Mr. and Miss S. Sutton. The final dagger, Ethan had even given her Naomi's last name. A day passed in a haze of heartbreak and planning. Naomi stayed in a modest boutique hotel across the Seine, consumed by swirling emotions. She had to figure out how best to confront Ethan and whether to confront Lauren as well. Jade cautioned her to remain methodical, especially now that she had the proof she needed for any legal recourse. But Naomi felt an urgency to see Ethan face to face, to catch him in the act. This was not just about finalizing a divorce or setting legal parameters. She needed closure. She needed to see the shock in his eyes when she revealed that his pregnant wife had followed him all the way to Paris. The following evening, Jade informed Naomi that Ethan had made dinner reservations for two at an exclusive restaurant near the Champs-Élysées. It was the perfect setting for a confrontation. Naomi slipped on a simple yet elegant black dress that hugged her baby bump discreetly. She arrived at the restaurant ahead of schedule, choosing a dimly lit corner table that offered a clear view of the entrance but kept her partially hidden by a column. Her heart pounded so violently she could hardly think. She sipped on water, her hand jittering against the glass. Then she saw them. Lauren entered first in a red dress that turned heads across the restaurant. Ethan followed, wearing a bespoke navy suit, looking every inch the charismatic billionaire. He guided Lauren to their reserved table just a few meters from Naomi. Naomi watched, tears threatening to spill, as Ethan leaned in to speak to Lauren. She saw the affectionate tilt of his head, recognized his gesture. It was the same intimate posture he once used when they shared secret jokes. She recalled the warmth she used to feel whenever he did it. Now it only brought on a wave of nausea. 20 minutes passed. Food and wine began arriving at their table. Naomi summoned every ounce of her courage. With trembling resolve, she rose from her seat and walked toward them. Adrenaline surged through her body, the pounding of her heart echoing in her ears. She caught the slight furrow of Ethan's brow as she stepped into his line of sight. It took him a moment to register who she was. He was clearly not expecting his pregnant wife to appear in Paris, let alone in the same restaurant. Naomi stopped at their table, hands steady but heart raging. Ethan's eyes widened in horror. Lauren looked puzzled, glancing between them. For an excruciating moment, no one spoke. The quiet tension gathered like a storm cloud, ready to unleash thunder. "Naomi," Ethan finally breathed, color draining from his face. Naomi surveyed him, then turned her gaze on Lauren, who stared back in confusion. The entire restaurant felt as if it was holding its breath. "Ethan," she said, forcing calm into her voice, "I see you're enjoying your trip to London. Or is it Rome? I forget which lie you told me this time." Lauren's jaw dropped as her eyes darted from Ethan to Naomi's pronounced belly. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that the woman confronting them was very pregnant and wearing a wedding band identical to Ethan's. Tension crackled in the air. Other diners began to take notice, some leaning in to eavesdrop. Ethan tried to stammer something, but his words stuck. Naomi glared, feeling an unexpected wave of confidence swirl within her. "So this is Lauren," she said, turning her laser-focused gaze on the mistress. "Let me guess, you didn't know he was married. Or did you?" Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it again, her eyes flickering with guilt. Naomi sensed she might have known from the start. The hush around them was deafening, and in that moment, Naomi realized she was done being the silent, wronged wife. The time for illusions was over. The restaurant, with all its hushed conversation and candlelit ambience, transformed into a theater of shock as Naomi confronted Ethan and Lauren in front of unsuspecting patrons. Tension shimmered like electric current. Naomi felt a storm of emotions batter her, rage, heartbreak, and a maternal instinct to fight for her child's future. Yet she forced herself to remain composed. She refused to let Ethan see just how deeply he'd shattered her. Ethan's face, drained to ashen grey, his eyes wide with panic. He tried to speak words, jumbled into an incoherent stutter. Lauren, for her part, clutched the edge of the table, looking like a cornered animal. Naomi could not help but notice that beneath Lauren's polished veneer, fear flickered in her gaze. Naomi suspected that Lauren may have known about Ethan's marriage after all. The media had often featured them as a high-profile power couple. Could Lauren have been naive enough to believe his version of events, or did she simply not care? Summoning a steady voice, Naomi said, "I followed you to Paris. One have proof of everything." She nodded at the ring on Lauren's finger, an unmistakable engagement band. "So, our congratulations in order for the happy couple." Ethan reached out, his voice a hushed plea. "Naomi, please, not here." Naomi ignored him and turned to Lauren. "Did he tell you his wife is pregnant with his child? Or did he conveniently leave that detail out?" Lauren's eyes darted. She stammered. He said you weren't in the picture anymore. That you?" She broke off, obviously flustered. Naomi's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Well, guess what? I'm very much in the picture. And so is our unborn child." A ripple of disapproval circled around the tables nearby. Diners glanced over, either enthralled by the unfolding drama or awkwardly trying to mind their own business. The manager hovered at a distance, torn between intervening and allowing the spectacle to continue. Ethan abruptly rose from his chair, grabbing Naomi's wrist. "Let's step outside," he hissed, trying to contain his fury behind a forced civility. "We can talk about this in private." Naomi yanked her wrist free, her voice rose, sharpened by betrayal. "You lost the right to privacy the moment you decided to parade your mistress around Paris, telling everyone she's Mrs. Sutton." Lauren stood as well, tears forming in her eyes. "Ethan, you told me." Ethan cut her off with a fierce glare, pressing a palm to his temple as though battling a migraine. The triad of them stood there, locked in a standoff. Finally, Naomi turned on her heel and strode for the door. She felt Ethan's footsteps behind her as she emerged onto the sidewalk, where the Parisian night offered no comfort, only the chilling bite of early spring air. "I can explain," Ethan said, breathless. Once they were outside, it wasn't supposed to. Naomi whirled to face him, eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. "Explain what? That you've been cheating on me, lying to me, humiliating me? Explain that you planned to buy her a property here, all while your pregnant wife wondered why you couldn't attend a single ultrasound appointment." He stepped closer. She saw the lines of stress etched into his once handsome features. "It's complicated, Naomi. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The expansion, my parents' expectations, the board, and Lauren, she was just what? A fling," Naomi snapped. "Your text messages suggest otherwise. It looks like a long-term, premeditated affair to me." He raked a hand through his hair. "I never meant to hurt you. I needed an escape. Things got overwhelming. And yes, maybe I found comfort in Lauren, but it was never meant to last. An escape from your pregnant wife?" Her tone went from furious to heartbreakingly vulnerable. "You destroyed our marriage for a cheap thrill." A flicker of guilt, or perhaps fear, danced in his eyes. "I swear, Naomi, I still love you." It got out of hand. He glanced over his shoulder, where Lauren hovered at the restaurant door, uncertain. I told her I wanted out of it, but she threatened to go public. Naomi stared at him in disbelief. So you're blaming her now? You took her on romantic dinners, expensive vacations, used our last name for reservations. Who do you think you are fooling? Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but words failed him. In that moment, Naomi recognized that her illusions about her husband's decency had been shattered once and for all. The man in front of her was willing to twist the truth to protect himself, no matter how many people he hurt in the process. Suddenly, Jade appeared from across the street, stepping into the glow of a street lamp. She had her camera in hand, capturing the final confrontation from a distance. She looked solemn as Naomi caught her eye. Naomi was grateful for Jade's unwavering presence, someone who could validate her reality amid Ethan's endless denials. The reality of the situation settled in Naomi's chest like a weight. She was done entertaining excuses. She turned away, summoning the last dregs of her strength. We're done, Ethan. I'm going back to the hotel. You can stay with Lauren or whoever else you want, but I won't remain trapped in your web of lies. His eyes flashed with desperation. Don't leave me, Naomi. We can fix this. Naomi glared at him, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. You and I both know this can't be fixed. She walked away, leaving Ethan standing on the sidewalk, uncertain and frantic. The bright city lights of Paris blurred in Naomi's vision as the final shards of her heartbreak pierced her. She felt the baby move inside her, a reminder of what truly mattered. Whether Ethan would let her go or not, she was determined to fight for a future free of deceit. The time had come to sever the toxic ties that bound her to a man who had so carelessly shattered her trust. Early the next morning, Naomi awoke in her small boutique hotel, mind reeling from the previous night's confrontation. She checked her phone and saw a barrage of missed calls and frantic text messages from Ethan. Pleas for forgiveness, half-hearted explanations, all culminating in an admission of guilt. I messed up, Naomi. Please pick up. She ignored them. Instead, she summoned Jade and her driver to meet in the lobby. Tucked into a quiet corner beside a potted palm, Naomi declared her plan to return to New York that very afternoon. I'll let my lawyers handle the rest, she told Jade, her voice quivering with exhaustion. I've got all the proof I need for divorce, a custody arrangement, and anything else I might need to protect me and my child. Jade nodded, sympathy lighting her eyes. You've been very brave, Naomi, and if you need further help locating assets, ensuring a fair settlement, I'm here. Naomi appreciated Jade's professionalism. She had never anticipated using a private investigator to confirm her husband's betrayal, but it turned out to be a lifeline. Thank you, Naomi whispered. I guess it's time for me to stand on my own now. Before leaving, though, Naomi needed to settle one final matter. She texted Ethan to meet her in the hotel's small cafe. She wanted a last conversation in which she made it clear that his attempts at reconciliation were futile. Ethan arrived, visibly haggard. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his usual impeccable attire was rumpled. He looked like a man whose carefully curated life had spun out of control. The moment he spotted Naomi, he rushed forward, grasping at her hands. Naomi, please. We have years together. He paused, glancing at her belly. We have a child on the way. Let's not throw that away. Naomi pulled back, spine stiff. Stop, she said quietly. I'm filing for divorce. I don't want anything to do with you anymore, except for what's necessary for the baby. And let me be clear, I will never forgive you for the lies, the humiliation, for making me doubt my own sanity. Ethan's voice cracked. I'll give you anything you want. The New York penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, financial support. Just don't shut me out of our child's life. Naomi's lips thinned. That's for the courts to decide. Don't think a wave of money can fix this. I'm not your puppet. She steeled herself, recalling the meltdown she witnessed the previous night. Perhaps he was finally realizing the gravity of what he'd done, yet she couldn't find it in herself to pity him. The heartbreak was too raw. He tried one last approach. My parents will be devastated. The Sutton family name. Naomi clenched her fists. Stop using your family name as a shield. That's all you've ever done. Hide behind wealth, behind your father's empire, behind your last name. You made your bed, Ethan. Now you can lie in it. She turned, ignoring the wounded look in his eyes. The man who stood before her was no longer her Prince Charming, but a liar who had disregarded his vows and jeopardized the life they had built together. Naomi refused to let her resolve waver. This was survival. This was her protecting herself and her child from further harm. That afternoon, Naomi boarded a flight back to New York, tears burning at the edges of her eyes as the plane soared above the clouds. Memories of Ethan bombarded her, their wedding dance, their plans to grow old together, the baby's future. She let the tears fall silently, each one washing away fragments of the illusions she once cherished. She felt hollow, but there was also a sense of fierce clarity. She was returning to chart a new path, a path free of the betrayal that had nearly consumed her. Upon landing, she discovered the media was already buzzing with rumors. Photos of her confrontation with Ethan and Lauren at the Paris restaurant had surfaced online. Some paparazzi had evidently captured the scene from a distance, turning it into tabloid fodder. Billionaire Sutton caught in Paris with Mistress wife conference in public showdown. Naomi braced herself for the onslaught. She was not naive about how quickly the tabloids spun sensational narratives, especially involving the Sutton name. She checked into a friend's loft in Soho, far from the penthouse she once called home. Annabelle, her dearest friend, offered unwavering support, urging her to rest and reminding her to take care of her health. Over steaming cups of herbal tea, Naomi revealed everything, tears streaming as she recounted the betrayal. Annabelle cradled Naomi's hand. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "Don't let him or anyone else make you feel like you did something wrong." In the midst of her grief, Naomi felt the baby's occasional kick, an ever-present reminder that a new life depended on her strength. She vowed to never let her child become a pawn in Ethan's twisted game, and if that meant going to war with the Sutton family over finances or custody, she was prepared. She hired top divorce attorneys, known for their ruthless expertise in high-profile cases. They assured her she had a solid advantage thanks to Jade's meticulous evidence. Naomi felt the swirl of relief and fear in equal measure. She was stepping into a fight that would likely turn the media spotlight into a searing glare, rummaging through her personal life and broadcasting it to the world. But after everything she'd endured, Naomi was done running from the truth. Meanwhile, Ethan had retreated to crisis management mode. She heard through mutual acquaintances that his father, Charles Sutton, had summoned him to a private meeting. Furious about the negative press, investors were rattled, shareholders demanded answers. And Lauren? Rumor had it she was staying in a discreet hotel, not the Ritz, presumably reeling from the scandal. Naomi gleaned no satisfaction from their downfall, only a grim acknowledgement that karma had begun to collect its debt. In the weeks following the Paris confrontation, Naomi steeled herself for the legal battle that loomed. She moved into a smaller, cozy apartment in Tribeca, courtesy of Annabelle's connections. The new space was humble compared to her former penthouse, but it was exactly what Naomi needed, a refuge from the memories of betrayal. It didn't take long for the Sutton family to unleash their lawyers, bombarding Naomi with proposals to negotiate privately. They were clearly desperate to keep the scandal contained. Naomi's own lawyers, a formidable team headed by a fierce litigator named Miranda Lowe, advised her not to cave to intimidation. Miranda reviewed the evidence Naomi had collected: photos, texts, financial records, and smiled grimly. They'll try to paint you as a gold digger or claim your mental state is compromised. But we won't back down. You're entitled to a fair settlement, and you have every right to request full custody, given the circumstances. Naomi tightened her grip on the edges of her chair. Despite her heartbreak, she felt a rush of determination. I won't let them manipulate the situation. I want what's best for my baby. Over the next few days, the negotiations ping-ponged back and forth. Ethan reached out personally, offering Naomi substantial settlements if she would agree to shared custody and sign a non-disclosure agreement. She refused to sign anything that might bind her to more secrecy. The world already knew enough to form their own opinions, so what good would a gag order serve? Behind the scenes, the media tore into Ethan, branding him the unfaithful heir. His father, Charles Sutton, made a public statement condemning his son's actions, and the Sutton International stock took a notable dip. Investors were spooked. Major partners started pulling out of deals, and Ethan found himself scrambling to salvage the company's public image. It was the sort of PR disaster that easily spiraled when mixed with marital betrayal and tabloid sensationalism. Yet even as the Sutton empire suffered, Naomi refused to take pleasure in their misfortune. She recalled her nights lying awake, worrying about how to salvage their marriage. Ethan's heartbreak might have been overshadowed by arrogance, but he was still the father of her child. Part of her felt an overwhelming sadness that it had come to this. Another part, though, insisted that Ethan deserved the consequences for his choices. And so did Lauren. In a dramatic twist, Lauren filed a lawsuit against Ethan, claiming he had emotional entrapment and broken promises of marriage. The tabloids seized this new scandal. Some labeled Lauren a gold digger. Others portrayed her as a naive young woman manipulated by a powerful man. Naomi had no sympathy for her. Lauren had clearly known Ethan was married. The illusions she might have sustained were willful or fueled by greed. During one tense negotiation, Ethan's attorneys claimed that Naomi's presence in Paris, where she publicly confronted him, had harmed Ethan's reputation. Miranda Lowe laughed outright at this. Your client engaged in public adultery and used the Sutton name for illicit activities. My client simply uncovered the truth. You'll have a hard time convincing any judge that she's the guilty party. Ethan, appearing increasingly haggard, tried calling Naomi late at night. Sometimes she picked up to hear him sigh or apologize in broken words. Other nights, she let it go to voicemail. Each conversation left her emotionally drained, but she tried to remain civil. After all, she needed to think of the child who would soon be entering the world. She couldn't let hatred poison their future co-parenting arrangement, if co-parenting was even feasible. Amid the swirling chaos, Naomi leaned on her small network of trusted friends, forging ahead with plans for the baby. She visited a doctor for regular checkups, her heart fluttering at the sound of the baby's steady heartbeat on the ultrasound. She began prenatal yoga, focusing on each breath, releasing tension from her body. This was her sanctuary, a peaceful interlude in an otherwise tumultuous time. Annabelle hosted a modest baby shower in her Soho loft. There were only a handful of attendees, close friends from Naomi's non-profit work, and a few acquaintances who had proven their loyalty. They brought thoughtful, practical gifts, diapers, tiny onesies, soft blankets. Tears prickled at Naomi's eyes as she realized she might be doing this journey alone. But she felt a surge of empowerment too. She would build a loving environment for her child, with or without Ethan's involvement. While Naomi prepared emotionally for single motherhood, the Sutton family took a public blow. Whispers circulated that Charles Sutton was furious with Ethan, claiming his reckless behavior had cost them their long-standing alliances. Real estate deals fell through, and some board members proposed removing Ethan from his CEO position to salvage the company's integrity. In an ironic twist, the affair that Ethan had tried to keep hidden in the shadows now threatened his entire empire. Karma was indeed making its presence felt. Every time Naomi checked the business news, she noticed Sutton International's stock dipping a little further. Sponsors withdrew from the philanthropic galas hosted by the Suttons, citing the negative press. High-profile acquaintances who once flocked to Ethan's parties now kept their distance. For Naomi, it was a bittersweet vindication. She had never wished for Ethan's professional downfall, but she understood that betraying your spouse, especially in such a public manner, carried consequences. And the bigger you were, the harder you fell. If Ethan had not deceived her, if he had not publicly flaunted his mistress, none of this would be happening. But now it was all unraveling, unstoppable as an avalanche in the mountains. The final hearing for Naomi and Ethan's divorce arrived on a brisk morning, just a month shy of Naomi's due date. Cameras flashed outside the Manhattan courthouse, capturing Naomi stepping out of a black SUV, wearing a simple maternity dress and clutching a folder of legal documents. She refused to shield her face from the paparazzi. She had been humiliated enough. This time, she would face the world with dignity. Ethan was already inside the courtroom, looking gaunt in an expensive suit that hung a bit too loosely on his frame. Tension rippled through the air as the lawyers arranged themselves. Naomi's heart pounded. This was the moment she dreaded and anticipated in equal measure, the official end of her marriage. Proceedings began with formalities. Then came the crossfire of legal arguments, property settlements, custody arrangements. Miranda presented the compelling evidence of Ethan's affair, plus the emotional distress it had caused Naomi. The judge nodded gravely, well aware of the media circus swirling outside these walls. Ethan's counsel tried to mitigate damage, asserting that Ethan deeply regretted his actions. They argued that he wished to remain part of his child's life. Naomi allowed tears to slip down her cheeks, but her expression remained composed as she recounted the months of deceit she endured. At last, after hours of negotiation and the judge's careful deliberation, a settlement was reached. Naomi retained full custody of their unborn child, with structured visitation rights granted to Ethan pending a psychological evaluation. The judge awarded Naomi a significant share of marital assets and monthly support that would ensure she and the baby would never want for anything. The entire arrangement was hammered into a formal, binding decree. Ethan rose to his feet, face etched with remorse. Naomi watched him approach, ignoring the pointed stares from reporters and onlookers. He spoke softly. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to get this far." For a moment, Naomi considered whether to offer him a kind word, but the wounds were too fresh. The memory of him kissing Lauren, whispering sweet nothings in her ear at that Paris restaurant, still burned in Naomi's mind. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said simply, turning away as the bailiff signaled the end of the hearing. Outside, a sea of flashing cameras greeted Naomi. Microphones were thrust toward her, frenzied voices asking for a statement. She offered none, navigating toward her waiting vehicle with stoic grace. Annabelle was inside, offering a supportive hand. Naomi's heart pounded with a mix of exhaustion and relief. "It's over," she told herself. Or at least, the marriage was. In the following weeks, Ethan's fortunes continued to decline. The Sutton International Board voted to temporarily remove him from his position as CEO, pending an internal investigation into the misuse of company funds for personal travel and lavish gifts. Charles Sutton openly chastised his son, lamenting the damage done to the family legacy. On the other hand, Naomi moved forward with a sense of liberation. She immersed herself in final preparations for the baby's arrival, painting a soft, neutral-toned nursery in her Tribeca apartment. Day by day, she felt her spirits lift. She was forging a new identity, not as Ethan Sutton's wife, But as Naomi strong, independent, and a soon-to-be mother, the day her baby girl was born was filled with both pain and wonder. Naomi named her Ava Grace, and the first time she held that tiny bundle in her arms, every tragedy in her life seemed to recede. The hospital room glowed in the soft overhead lights. Annabelle and a few close friends stood by, tears of joy shining in their eyes. Ethan attempted to visit, sending messages that he wanted to see his daughter. But Naomi, still recovering, needed time. Instead, she sent him a picture of Ava, carefully swaddled, her delicate features bearing faint traces of the father she'd inherited them from. Ethan's replies were contrite and full of longing. Naomi remained cautious, placing Ava's well-being above everything else. Any illusions of a romantic reconciliation were gone. They would be co-parents if Ethan could prove he was stable and committed. In the quiet hours of her hospital stay, Naomi gazed at little Ava, amazed by the miracle of life. She felt a weight lifting from her heart, replaced by a deep conviction that she and her daughter would flourish. There would be love in Ava's life, a love untainted by deception. As she prepared to leave the hospital, Annabelle helped Naomi pack the baby's belongings. Together, they stepped into the crisp air outside, where a few reporters still lingered, hoping for an image of the newest Sutton heir. Naomi shielded Ava gently. She thought of the past year and how it had tested her in unimaginable ways. Yet here she was, stronger, motherly, determined to safeguard her family. Karma had indeed claimed its debts. Ethan faced a steep fall from grace, his mistress filed lawsuits, and the Sutton empire bore deep scars. Naomi refused to cling to anger. Instead, she focused on building a new life with her baby. She would teach Ava the values of honesty and compassion that money could never buy. And if Ethan truly wanted redemption, he would have to earn it the hard way. And so ends this tumultuous tale of a seemingly perfect billionaire marriage, unraveled by lies and betrayal in the romantic city of Paris. Naomi's journey demonstrates that even in the darkest moments, we can find the strength to stand up, protect our own, and begin anew. We watched Ethan face the consequences of his choices, his grand empire shaken by scandal and disloyalty, proof that nobody is invincible when truth demands a reckoning. If you've been captivated by Naomi's resilience and the dramatic twists that turned her life upside down, please consider showing your support. Like this video to let us know you enjoy these powerful stories of heartbreak and redemption. Share it with friends who appreciate an intense, dramatic saga, and subscribe to our channel for more riveting tales. Your engagement helps us continue delivering stories that remind us all of the power of truth and perseverance.